There is a quiet strength in clarity, a depth in knowing exactly who you are, what you want, and why it matters. In a world that constantly demands movement, reaction, and endless noise, the power of precision does not shout, it whispers. It does not ask us to chase more, it invites us to return inward, to the still center of our own intention. Calvin W. Nathan, in his gentle yet potent language, does not give us a map to success. He gives us a compass, one forged in self-awareness, discipline, and refined focus. Precision, as he describes, is not about perfection. It is about alignment. And alignment is where real power begins. The book starts not with strategies or steps, but with a call to awaken to how much of life we live on autopilot. We make decisions daily, what to say, who to be, how to spend our time, yet how many of those choices are made with care, with presence, with truth? Nathan challenges us, not by criticizing our distractions, but by inviting us to remember what it feels like to be intentional. There is something sacred in doing even the smallest thing with purpose, whether it's how you fold your shirt or how you say goodbye to someone you love. Precision isn't limited to tasks or routines. It's about the energy we bring to every corner of our lives. One of the earliest insights Nathan shares is that most people are not suffering from a lack of opportunity, they are suffering from a lack of clarity. He writes that many of our struggles come from vague desires, unclear values, or undefined boundaries. We say we want success, but we don't define what success means to us. We say we want peace, but we haven't clarified what disturbs our peace. When we are not specific with our vision, we become vulnerable to distraction, comparison, and emotional confusion. So the first gift of precision is clarity, not as a mental exercise, but as an inner state. You begin to see your life like a sculptor sees marble, not for what it is, but for what it could become if you cut away everything that isn't essential. This mindset shift changes everything. You stop measuring yourself by how busy you are, and start measuring yourself by how aligned you are. Are your days built around your values, or are they shaped by convenience and noise? Are your relationships nurtured with honesty and presence, or are they diluted by passivity and unspoken expectations? Nathan says that precision brings peace, not because it simplifies life, but because it clarifies what deserves your energy. And in a world where attention is currency, there is nothing more powerful than being deliberate with what you give your mind to. One of the most profound ideas in the book is that precision is an act of love. When you show up clearly with honest intent, thoughtful words, and disciplined action, you are honoring your own existence and the space you occupy in other people's lives. Precision is not about controlling everything. It's about respecting everything. Think about it. When someone looks you in the eye and speaks to you with care, when they remember your name or follow through on their promise, when they show up on time or listen without interruption, don't you feel seen? Don't you feel valued? That is the power of precision. It communicates love, not through grand gestures, but through consistent presence. Nathan also brings attention to language. The words we use shape the world we live in. He encourages us to speak with precision, not to impress, but to express truth. So often we use language to hide, "I'm fine," when we're breaking, "I'll try," when we're not committed, "maybe," when we really mean no. He challenges us to remove the fog from our speech, to say what we mean and mean what we say. Because when your language is unclear, your life becomes unclear. But when you speak with purpose, your energy aligns and people begin to trust you, not because you're perfect, but because you're consistent. This extends beyond speech into habits. Nathan emphasizes that precision in action is the foundation of excellence. Excellence isn't random. It's not the result of talent alone. It is the product of refined repetition. He uses the metaphor of a sculptor again, reminding us that greatness is not built by doing everything, but by doing a few things with depth and integrity. Whether it's your morning routine, your writing practice, your exercise ritual, or your way of managing time, the question is not, how much can I do, but how well can I do what matters? Precision requires you to choose, and that is where most people get stuck because choice demands responsibility. It is easier to be vague. It is easier to say yes to everything and blame burnout on the world. But precision requires you to say no, to set boundaries, to disappoint others, sometimes in order to honor yourself. And that can feel uncomfortable, even selfish. But Nathan reframes this. He says that precision is not selfish, it is sacred. It is the realization that you cannot give your best to the world unless you first give it to yourself. When you live with precision, you don't just protect your energy, you multiply it. You become more effective, more reliant, more at peace. And from that place, your contribution becomes powerful, not because it's loud, but because it's real. The book gently leads us into a deeper realization that clarity is not just external, but emotional. If we want to live with precision, we must become emotionally honest. We must stop avoiding the feelings we don't want to face. Resentment, fear, envy, grief, these are not weaknesses to be suppressed, but messages to be understood. Nathan says that emotional precision is the ability to name what you feel, where it's coming from, and what it's teaching you. He teaches us not to run from our emotions, but to sit with them like wise guests, to ask them what they want us to learn. And in that presence, healing begins. He also speaks about relationships. Precision in relationships means we don't leave people guessing. We express our needs. We set expectations. We take responsibility for our part. We stop punishing others for things they don't know, and we stop waiting for them to read our minds. Relationships suffer not because of conflict, but because of confusion. Nathan says that clarity breeds safety. When people know where they stand with you, they can relax into trust. And when you know where you stand with yourself, you stop seeking validation in places that drain you. Throughout this journey, Nathan continually brings us back to one quiet but powerful question. Is this in alignment with who I really am? That question becomes a mirror. It becomes a compass. It becomes a filter. When you ask it before you speak, act, or commit, your life begins to change. You start releasing what isn't yours. You stop forcing things that don't fit. You become more patient because you trust the timing of things aligned with your truth. And slowly, the noise fades. The chaos subsides. And all that remains is what's essential. There is a part in the book where Nathan writes about the fear of missing out, how it leads so many people to scatter their energy in every direction. He counters that by introducing the idea of the joy of missing out, that when you live with precision, you don't fear what you're missing, you feel joy in what you're choosing. You realize that life isn't about having everything. It's about choosing what is yours, deeply and truly, and giving it your whole self. That is freedom. That is maturity. That is precision. And precision does not mean rigidity. Nathan is clear that precision is not about being controlling, obsessive, or hard on yourself. It is not about eliminating all spontaneity. It's about living with intention. You can still laugh, rest, wander, explore, but even your play becomes more joyful when it's chosen with awareness. Even your rest becomes more nourishing when it's guilt-free and deliberate. Precision is not the enemy of freedom, it is its foundation. When you know what matters, you can let go of what doesn't. And that, in itself, is a kind of lightness. There's a deep compassion in Nathan's voice, woven through every line. He understands how easy it is to live scattered, how often we betray our own priorities in the name of people-pleasing or self-doubt. But he doesn't shame us for this. He simply invites us back to center, back to alignment, back to ourselves. The path of precision, he says, is not a straight line. It's a daily return, a gentle ray choosing. And each time you return, you build trust with yourself. And from that trust, everything else flows. As we near the end of this first part of our journey, one truth becomes clear. The power of precision is not about doing more. It is about becoming more you. Not the version shaped by fear or pressure, but the version that knows what matters and lives accordingly. There is nothing more liberating than that, and there is nothing more powerful. When we think of transformation, we often imagine grand changes, a career shift, a new city, a new relationship, or a sudden surge of motivation that turns everything around. But Calvin W. Nathan leads us to a different kind of transformation, one that is subtle, gentle, rooted not in sudden motion, but in refined focus. The kind of transformation that doesn't always look like a leap, but feels like a quiet remembering, a slow, intentional alignment of the outer world with the inner self. And this is where the power of precision continues to unfold. Nathan explains that the greatest transformations don't come from doing more, they come from doing less, but with more clarity. That is the paradox many people struggle with. We are conditioned to chase, to hustle, to fill every minute. But what if growth comes not from acceleration, but from subtraction, from cutting away what no longer fits, from saying no, not out of fear, but out of integrity? This is where precision becomes an act of pruning, like a gardener who trims the branches not to hurt the tree, but to help it grow stronger. It requires discernment, a willingness to let go of what once felt important, but no longer serves who you are becoming. Nathan invites us to look at our routines, our relationships, our habits, and ask, does this reflect my highest values? Or is it just familiar? Familiarity is comfortable, but it's not always aligned. Sometimes, the greatest barrier to precision is the unwillingness to release comfort. But the moment you begin to live with refined focus, something begins to shift. You start noticing the cost of your yes. You stop giving your time away casually. You begin protecting your mornings. You say no without guilt. You become more selective with the energy you allow around you. This is not cold. This is love in its most mature form. Because the more precise you are with your life, the more presence you bring to those you choose to give it to. Nathan also speaks of energy management not in the way of productivity hacks, but in a deeply human sense. He says your energy is your essence. It is the invisible thread that weaves through everything you do, say, and feel. Precision, then, is the ability to preserve and direct your energy toward what matters. It is the art of showing up fully in fewer places, rather than scattering yourself thin across everything. He tells the story of a woman who was always exhausted not because she had too much on her plate, but because she gave her energy to everything without a filter. She said yes to every request, answered every message, and attended every gathering, yet felt unseen, drained, and disconnected from herself. The shift happened when she began asking, is this in service of my purpose, or just a way to avoid discomfort? That question became her turning point. Slowly, she reclaimed her energy, not by doing less necessarily, but by doing what aligned more deeply. Nathan describes this as emotional stewardship, the discipline to honor your energy as sacred, because everything you say yes to is a no to something else, and every no you offer is a yes to your inner clarity. This isn't about becoming rigid. It's about becoming rooted in who you are, what you stand for, and what you will no longer tolerate in your life. Another dimension of precision that Nathan explores is in how we receive feedback. Most people react emotionally to criticism or praise, but precision teaches us to respond with wisdom. When you know who you are, not every opinion can shake you. You no longer need to defend every choice or seek validation in every room. Nathan teaches that precise living requires emotional maturity, the capacity to listen with openness, but respond with discernment. You begin to ask yourself, is this feedback helpful? Is it coming from someone who lives with the values I admire? Or is it noise dressed as advice? And just like that, your inner world becomes less chaotic. You stop internalizing every opinion. You stop molding yourself into what others expect. You start honoring your own path. And in that, you find freedom. Precision also influences how we set goals. Nathan reminds us that vague goals lead to vague outcomes. We often say we want to be better, or feel happy, or be successful. But what do those words mean to us? What does better look like, feel like, sound like? The power of precision lies in making the abstract tangible. Not just saying, I want to be healthy, but defining what that looks like. Is it sleeping 8 hours, walking daily, drinking water, reducing sugar, or managing stress? Specificity creates structure, and structure allows consistency. He also emphasizes that goals are not just external, they should reflect your internal values. For example, you might set a goal to earn more money, but if the method you use violates your peace or forces you to live inauthentically, then precision would tell you, this is not the right path. You must find the intersection of alignment and ambition. That's where your life becomes rich, not just with success, but with peace. And in that pursuit, Nathan introduces the practice of reflection. Precision cannot exist without reflection. We must pause regularly and ask, is my direction aligned with my values? Are my actions reflecting my intentions? He suggests journaling not just to record thoughts, but to refine them, to sit with your experiences and learn from them. Because clarity grows in stillness. In the quiet moments when you listen deeply not to the world, but to your soul, he says one of the most transformative habits is starting your day with intention and ending it with reflection. Just 5 minutes in the morning to ask, what matters today? What energy do I want to bring? And 5 minutes at night to ask, did I live today with presence? What can I refine tomorrow? These small practices become rituals, and rituals, done with precision, become anchors. They hold you steady in a world that is always shifting. Nathan also explores the spiritual side of precision. He believes that precision is not just a human practice, it's a divine principle. The universe itself operates with precision. From the orbit of planets to the structure of DNA, everything follows patterns of purpose and alignment. So when you live with clarity, when you speak with integrity and act with presence, you are not just improving your life, you are aligning with something greater. You become a vessel of divine order, a reflection of sacred design. He encourages us to trust that when we live with precision, life responds. Doors open, relationships deepen, peace becomes natural. This doesn't mean life becomes easy, but it becomes clear. And clarity is its own form of grace. One of the more moving parts of the book is when Nathan shares about the grief of losing time, losing people, or losing parts of yourself along the journey. He says that precision helps you mourn more gently, because when you live with intention, you don't carry the burden of regret. You may grieve what ended, but you don't punish yourself for what was honest. Precision allows you to let go with love. It helps you see that not everything is meant to last, but everything can teach you something, if you live it well. This insight leads to a deeper realization that precision is a gift, not only for the future, but for the present. Most people live either in the past, rehearsing their pain, or in the future, chasing a moment that hasn't arrived. But when you live with precision, you become rooted in the now. You understand that your power is here, in this moment, in this breath. And that is where transformation lives, not in the distance, but in the depth. As the second part of our reflection draws to a close, what we begin to see is that precision is not just a skill, it is a lifestyle. A way of seeing, a way of honoring yourself, your time, your values, and your soul. It is not loud, but it is powerful. It is not fast, but it is steady. And in a world that idolizes more, Nathan teaches us the strength of less noise, less distraction, less contradiction, so we can return to what is essential, what is sacred, what is real. As we continue deeper into the philosophy of the power of precision, something begins to settle in the soul. A soft clarity begins to take form. It's not urgent, not demanding, but quietly illuminating. Precision, we now understand, is not something we force upon life. It's something we uncover within ourselves. And what we're really discovering is that the more we refine the way we live, the more life starts to reflect our inner peace. Calvin W. Nathan introduces another layer to this process, the discipline of decision-making. Decision-making, he says, is where many people lose their power, not because they don't have choices, but because they don't commit. They hesitate, they second-guess, they wait for certainty. But Nathan reminds us that clarity is not something you wait for, it's something you choose. Every decision you delay creates emotional clutter. Every choice you avoid becomes a breeding ground for anxiety. But when you decide with alignment, when your choices are anchored in your values, you don't just move forward, you move forward with grace. He emphasizes that precision in decision-making requires two things: self-awareness, and courage. Self-awareness helps you understand what you truly want, not what others expect, not what society glorifies, but what your soul genuinely desires. And courage helps you act on that truth, even when it's inconvenient or misunderstood. That's why many people stay vague. Precision is clear, and clarity demands responsibility. It's easier to say, figuring it out, than to say, this is my path. But that lack of commitment comes at a cost. It robs your energy, fragments your focus, and keeps your life on pause. Nathan suggests a practice for bringing precision to your decisions. He calls it the 3 whys. Before you commit to anything, ask yourself, why do I want this? Why now? Why this way? The first question helps uncover your motivation. The second helps evaluate timing. And the third helps assess your method. If your answers are unclear or rooted in fear, ego, or social pressure, then pause. But if your answers are grounded in love, purpose, and alignment, then act, and act boldly. Because nothing moves the universe like a clear decision. Precision in decision-making also protects us from overwhelm. Nathan talks about the myth of multitasking, how trying to be everything, and respond to everything weakens our presence. The truth is, you can't do everything well, but you can do what matters deeply, powerfully, beautifully. When you live with focus, the quality of your life increases, even if the quantity of your tasks decreases. The most successful people, he says, are not the busiest, they are the most precise. They don't chase every opportunity. They choose what aligns, and they go deep. This concept extends into relationships as well. Precision is vital in love, friendship, mentorship, any connection where 2 souls meet. Nathan teaches that vague relationships breed resentment. When we don't communicate our needs, when we avoid hard conversations, when we pretend we're okay with things we're not, we create invisible contracts that lead to visible pain. But when we're precise, when we say, this is what I need, or this doesn't feel right, or this is what I can offer, we create trust. And trust is not built through perfection. It's built through consistency, honesty, and clarity. He invites us to bring precision to how we give and receive love. To ask ourselves, am I expressing love in a way the other person can understand? Am I hearing love in the way they're trying to give it? Many relationships suffer not from a lack of love, but from a lack of clarity in how love is expressed. One person gives love through service. The other needs words. One offers support in silence. The other needs presence and touch. Precision helps us close these gaps, not through pressure, but through awareness. When you understand the language of another soul, you learn to love them in a way that nourishes, not frustrates. Nathan also explores the emotional blocks that often keep people from living with precision. He speaks softly, but powerfully, about fear. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of being seen. These fears often cause people to stay vague, to keep their dreams hidden, to keep their hearts guarded. Precision is vulnerable. It's easier to say, I kind of want to write a book, than to say, writing a book. Because the more precise you are, the more exposed you feel. But Nathan urges us not to run from this discomfort. He teaches that growth lives inside that tension. The clarity that scares you is the doorway to the life you've been longing for. He tells the story of a man who spent years talking about starting a business. He had talent, ideas, and passion, but he lacked clarity. Every time someone asked him what he was working on, he gave a different answer. I'm exploring options. I'm researching, seeing what's out there. And years passed. It wasn't until he sat down and wrote a 1-page summary of what he truly wanted to build that everything began to shift. That page became his anchor. And though the journey wasn't easy, it became focused. Because once you define your path, you stop wandering. You start walking. And that's what Nathan reminds us, that your power multiplies when your vision becomes specific. When you say, this is the kind of parent I want to be. This is the kind of work I want to create. This is the kind of love I want to give. Suddenly, your actions begin to align. Your time organizes itself. Your boundaries take shape. And your life begins to mirror your inner clarity. He also speaks to the importance of integrity and precision. Precision is not just about what you do, it's about how you do it. Are you showing up fully? Are you doing what you promised? Are you living in a way that your words match your actions? Because when you live with integrity, people begin to trust your presence. And even more importantly, you begin to trust yourself. Nathan says that self-trust is the real reward of precision. When you live with vague intentions, your confidence fades. But when you live with clarity, even in small things, you build inner strength. When you say, you'll wake up early and you do. When you say, you'll follow through and you do. When you say no when you need to and you mean it. These acts accumulate, and they create a deep reservoir of trust within. So even when storms come, even when plans fall apart, you don't fall apart. Because you are anchored in your own alignment. This, Nathan teaches, is what real freedom feels like. Not the absence of responsibility, but the presence of clarity. You no longer fear missing out, because you know what you've chosen. You no longer chase approval, because you know your truth. You no longer compromise your peace, because you know its value. And in that freedom, you begin to thrive. Not because life is perfect, but because you are finally living on purpose. As we close this third part of our journey, it becomes clear that the power of precision is not just a book. It's a call, a gentle but undeniable invitation to stop drifting and to start choosing, to stop existing in fragments and to start living as a whole. It asks nothing from you but presence, and it gives you everything in return: clarity, peace, confidence, direction, and most of all, alignment. By now, as we sink more deeply into the wisdom of the power of precision, a quiet truth begins to bloom within the heart. Precision is not a concept to be mastered once, but a way of returning to yourself again and again. It's not an act of perfectionism, but of presence. The more we reflect on what Calvin W. Nathan is teaching, the more we understand that a precise life is a centered life. A life not pulled in every direction by urgency or fear, but one led by clarity, honesty, and deep, conscious intention. At this stage in the book, Nathan takes us into a different kind of precision, the precision of internal alignment. Up to this point, we've explored outer behaviors, daily decisions, boundaries, communication, and focus. But here, he draws the spotlight inward and teaches us how precision shapes the inner landscape of our beliefs, emotions, and identity. Because no matter how organized your day is, if your inner world is cluttered, your life will still feel scattered. He begins with a simple but profound idea: your beliefs shape your reality. Not metaphorically, but functionally. The beliefs you hold about who you are, what you deserve, what's possible, and what's valuable act as filters. They determine what you see, what you attract, and what you tolerate. If your beliefs are vague or outdated, so will be your actions. Precision, therefore, begins by asking, what do I truly believe? And are those beliefs serving the life I want to create? This becomes a process of mental refinement. Just as a craftsman sharpens his tools, Nathan encourages us to sharpen our inner stories. He invites us to examine the quiet assumptions that run our lives without our permission. The belief that we must always say yes to be loved. The belief that struggle equals worth. The belief that rest is laziness. The belief that we are not enough unless we're constantly achieving. These are not facts, they are inherited fragments. And until we bring precision to them, they will quietly dictate our lives. So, how do we change them? Nathan offers a practice he calls belief journaling. It's a process of daily writing that starts with the question, what do I believe about this situation, and is it really true? Let's say you're faced with a difficult conversation. You might journal, I believe if I speak honestly, they'll be upset. I believe it will make things worse. I believe avoiding it is safer. Then ask, is that belief based on truth or fear? Is it rooted in wisdom or past pain? This practice doesn't force change. It reveals clarity, and clarity leads to new choices. When you challenge your beliefs with precision, you begin to write new ones. I believe that truth, when spoken with kindness, creates healing. I believe that discomfort is a doorway to growth. I believe I am worthy of honest relationships. These new beliefs become the internal compass that guides your outer life. Because every transformation begins with an inner shift. Nathan goes further, bringing precision into the realm of emotion. He teaches that emotions are not interruptions, they are invitations, signals, not problems. And the more precisely you can name what you're feeling, the more power you gain over it. Many people live under emotional fog. They say, stressed, but what they really feel is unprepared, or rejected, or overwhelmed. They say, I'm fine, when they're lonely, or grieving, or lost. Precision asks us not to exaggerate or minimize our feelings, but to name them with courage and kindness. He recommends a simple emotional check-in each day, just a few minutes of sitting still and asking, what am I truly feeling? Where do I feel it in my body? What triggered this emotion? What is it teaching me? This simple act of presence creates space between the feeling and the reaction. It allows you to respond rather than react. And in that space, healing begins. Over time, emotional precision becomes an inner sanctuary. You begin to trust your emotions not as enemies, but as allies. Anger shows you where your boundaries are. Sadness shows you what you value. Fear shows you where your edges are. Joy shows you what to follow. When you live with emotional precision, you stop suppressing and start listening. And what you listen to, you begin to understand. And what you understand, you begin to heal. Nathan also addresses identity, the story we carry about who we are. This, he says, is one of the most powerful and overlooked areas where precision can radically change a life. Because who you believe you are will determine what you pursue, what you tolerate, and what you allow. If you see yourself as broken, you'll build a life around survival. If you see yourself as powerful, you'll build a life around vision. So Nathan invites us to define ourselves not based on our past, but based on our alignment. He offers a prompt. If I could speak the truth about who I am, without fear or shame, what would I say? At first, the answers are often cautious. I'm someone who tries to help. I'm doing my best. But with time, they become clear and bold. I am a teacher of wisdom. I'm an artist of healing. I'm a builder of sacred spaces. These are not just affirmations. They are declarations. And the more precise they become, the more your life begins to organize itself around them. This is the true essence of precision, not productivity, but personal power. The power to know yourself, to speak your truth, to align your life with what you value, and to let go of what doesn't fit that vision. It is not about being perfect. It's about being honest. And there is deep freedom in that honest. Nathan also teaches that with internal precision comes the natural emergence of spiritual discipline. Whether you believe in God, Source, the universe, or simply the intelligence of life, living with clarity honors that intelligence. It creates alignment between the divine and the daily. Your prayers become specific, your intentions become focused, your energy becomes directed, and your results become meaningful. He speaks of the soul as something that thrives not in noise, but in rhythm. And precision creates rhythm, a sacred routine, a flow. When you wake with intention, speak with presence, act with alignment, and rest with gratitude, your life becomes a spiritual practice. You are no longer just living, you are honoring life. And that reverence creates abundance, not just of material things, but of peace, connection, and deep joy. Perhaps one of the most tender insights Nathan shares is about forgiveness. He says that precision also heals our relationship with the past. Many people remain stuck not because they can't move forward, but because they carry unresolved stories, moments of shame, regret, or betrayal that have never been named with clarity. But when you bring precision to your past, when you stop generalizing pain and start seeing it clearly, healing becomes possible. He invites you to revisit old wounds, not to dwell, but to reframe. Ask, what happened? What did I feel? What did I believe because of that experience? And is that belief still true today? Forgiveness, he says, is not a vague feeling, it is a clear decision. A decision to release the story that no longer serves you. A decision to see yourself not as a victim, but as a soul who survived and grew wiser. Precision allows you to name your hurt, understand its message, and then let it go with grace. As this part of our journey draws to a close, we begin to feel the impact of what Nathan is truly offering. Not a method, not a hack, not a quick fix, but a lifestyle, a way of being, a path of presence, power, and peace. Precision is the way home to yourself, and every time you return to it, you become more whole. As we travel further into the teachings of the power of precision, we begin to sense that this path is not simply about tightening the edges of our lives, it's about sharpening the center. The deeper we go, the more we see that precision is not just an external discipline, but an internal alignment between soul, thought, word, and action. It is the slow, steady return to a life that is whole, not fragmented by contradiction, confusion, or emotional exhaustion. Calvin W. Nathan invites us to let go of the scattered, reactionary way of living that so many of us have come to normalize, and instead embody a way of life that is centered, sacred, and intentional. In this part of the journey, Nathan speaks to something incredibly vital: the relationship between time and precision. He opens with a humbling reminder: time is not renewable. Once it is spent, it cannot be reclaimed. And yet, so many of us spend our time like we have endless supply. We give it away in pieces to people who don't value it, to obligations we didn't agree to distractions that leave us emptier than when they found us. And over time, this casual leaking of minutes becomes a life that feels unfulfilled, disconnected, even wasted. But Nathan doesn't speak about time with urgency or panic, he speaks with reverence. He reminds us that time is sacred, that it is not just about how much we have, but how we use it. He encourages us to stop asking, "Do I have time for this?" and start asking, "Is this worth part of my life?" Because that's what every hour really is: a part of your life you'll never get back. And when you begin to live from that awareness, something shifts. You no longer rush. You become deliberate. You begin to design your day, your week, your month not around what is expected, but around what is essential. Nathan offers a gentle challenge: reclaim your morning. Even if it's only 15 minutes, begin each day not with urgency, but with clarity. Light a candle, breathe, journal, pray, walk, reflect, whatever brings you into presence. Because when the first moment of your day is intentional, it creates a ripple that touches everything that follows. Precision with time doesn't mean filling every hour, it means filling the right hours with the right kind of energy. And from there, peace begins to build. He introduces the idea of a personal rhythm, not a schedule based on productivity, but a rhythm rooted in well-being and clarity. What time do you feel most alert? When does your creativity rise? When does your body ask for rest? What practices nourish you? When you begin to notice these patterns, you can align your tasks, meetings, goals, and rest with your natural flow. And suddenly, life becomes less of a battle and more of a dance. You stop working against yourself and start working with your own nature. This idea naturally expands into how we relate to productivity. Nathan challenges the cultural obsession with constant output. He reminds us that doing more does not mean becoming more. Productivity without precision is just performance. You can check every box and still feel empty. You can meet every deadline and still feel off course. Precision brings meaning back to your effort. It asks not just what you're doing, but why, for whom, and from what place inside yourself it's coming. He introduces a powerful exercise. Before starting any task, pause and ask, does this align with who I am becoming? If the answer is yes, proceed with presence. If the answer is no, release it or delegate it. This simple practice transforms busyness into purpose. It brings intention to the grind. And when you begin living from this filter, you'll notice something profound: you get more done with less stress. Not because you're working harder, but because you're working aligned. Nathan then shifts into a conversation around sacred space, both physical and energetic. He explains that your environment reflects your inner world. A cluttered space often mirrors a cluttered mind. A chaotic home reflects unresolved emotions. But when you bring precision into your environment, it nurtures peace inside you. Cleanliness, order, beauty, these aren't shallow things. They are silent healers. He encourages you to look at your surroundings and ask, does this space support the life I say I want? Or is it keeping me tied to the version of myself I've outgrown? He's not promoting minimalism or aesthetic perfection. He's inviting intention. A desk with only what you need. A room with items that uplift your energy. A corner for reflection. Music that soothes you. Words that remind you of who you are. These small acts of space-making become spiritual practices. Because they are not about impressing others, they are about anchoring yourself. The same principle applies to the energetic spaces we carry our conversations, our commitments, our digital lives. Nathan invites us to do a soul audit. Who do you follow online? What do you consume daily? What voices do you allow into your emotional space? Are these things nourishing your spirit or draining it? When you clean your energetic diet, just as you clean your home, you begin to feel lighter, clearer, more focused. You stop being reactive. You start being intentional, and that changes everything. Another deeply moving section in this part of the book is where Nathan speaks about rest. In a world addicted to hustle, rest is often mistaken for laziness, but Nathan reframes it as sacred. Rest, he says, is not the absence of ambition, it is the foundation of clarity. You cannot hear your intuition when you're exhausted. You cannot make wise choices when you're constantly running. Precision honors cycles, work and pause, give and receive, speak and listen. He tells the story of a woman who had burned herself out caring for others. A mother, a leader, a healer. She was always available, always doing, always exhausted. And she thought that rest was selfish until she collapsed. And in that stillness, she realized something profound. When she rested, she became more available, not less. When she paused, she could hear God again. When she slept, her vision returned. Rest was not taking from others, it was restoring herself so she could give from a deeper well. Nathan encourages everyone to build rhythms of rest, not just vacations or naps, but soul rest, silence, stillness, time without input. He says, this is where the real alignment happens, not in the noise, but in the quiet, not in the rush, but in the pause. Rest, when done with intention, is a portal to deeper knowing, and precision honors that truth. This leads into a conversation around boundaries. Nathan sees boundaries not as walls, but as containers. They are the sacred lines that preserve your energy, your clarity, your growth. Without them, your life becomes porous. Other people's expectations flood in. Your own needs get buried, your time slips away. But with healthy boundaries, you protect your becoming. You choose where your energy goes. You say yes with joy and no without apology. And this, he says, is one of the highest forms of self-respect. But boundaries require clarity. You cannot set them unless you know what matters. That's why Nathan constantly brings us back to the root question. What is truly important to you? Not what looks good on paper, not what others say you should want, but what genuinely aligns with your soul. Once you know that, your boundaries are no longer emotional reactions, they become sacred agreements with yourself, with your values, with your vision. As we reflect on everything covered in this part of the book, the sacredness of time, the power of space, the rhythm of rest, the wisdom of boundaries, it becomes evident that precision is a kind of inner architecture, a structure built not with rules, but with reverence, not for control, but for peace. It is a slow, deliberate design of a life that feels like home to your spirit. And maybe that's what this book is truly about. Not achieving more, but returning to yourself. Not speeding up, but slowing down with purpose. Not perfecting your life, but living it with clarity, honesty, and grace. When you live this way, something remarkable begins to happen. Your days begin to match your values. Your relationships reflect your truth. Your goals align with your essence. And your peace, the kind of peace that doesn't need explanation, becomes your natural state. As the journey continues, Calvin W. Nathan begins to guide us into one of the most liberating realizations of all, that precision is not about being right, it's about being real. In this culture of filters, facades, and curated versions of self, many of us have been trained to pursue the appearance of clarity without embodying the truth of it. But the power of precision invites us into a kind of living that is deeper than image, more authentic than perfection, and more transformative than achievement. Nathan explains that clarity without courage becomes just another mask. You can write the most beautiful mission statement. You can recite your values. You can articulate your dreams with elegant words. But if you are afraid to live them, to act on them when it's uncomfortable, to choose them when it costs you approval, then your precision remains surface level. Real precision is not just in what you say, but in how you live when no one is watching. He shares a moving insight. Many people know what they want, they're just afraid to want it openly. They fear being misunderstood. They fear being too much or not enough. They fear the loneliness of walking away from the crowd, and so they stay vague. Not because they lack vision, but because they're afraid of what that vision will ask of them. This is where Nathan gently but firmly calls for integrity, not the kind of moral superiority that judges others, but the kind of inner honesty that holds you to your own truth. He introduces the idea of living unedited. This doesn't mean living recklessly. It means living truthfully, not shrinking to fit, not diluting your voice, not waiting for permission to honor what you know to be right for you. Nathan teaches that the more precise you become about your values, your identity, and your purpose, the more you must also become willing to disappoint the illusions others have placed upon you. And that, he says, is an act of spiritual maturity. Precision is an invitation to stop asking, "What will they think?" and start asking, "What will I feel if I betray myself again?" The second question is the one that leads to freedom. It leads to clear boundaries, honest conversations, aligned actions. And yes, sometimes it leads to endings, relationships, jobs, patterns that once held meaning but no longer serve your becoming. Nathan reminds us that grief is often a companion of growth. But that doesn't mean the choice was wrong. It simply means you're making room for what is true. He also speaks about the power of no. In a world that often teaches us to say yes in order to be liked, included, or safe, Nathan teaches us that every no is a sacred act of definition. When you say no to what drains you, what distracts you, or what dishonors you, you are not being difficult, you are being clear. And clarity is kindness, not just to others, but to yourself. The clearer your no becomes, the more powerful your yes becomes, because it comes from choice, not obligation. He tells the story of a man who had built a life around being the go-to person at work, in friendships, even in his family. He was always available, always saying yes, and slowly, almost invisibly, he began to disappear inside his own life. His time wasn't his dreams faded, his energy drained, until one day, sitting in silence, he asked himself a powerful question. When did I stop living for myself? That moment became the catalyst for change. He began to say no gently, but firmly. He reclaimed his mornings. He withdrew from toxic commitments. And over time, his life began to resemble him again. This is the power of precision. It reintroduces you to yourself. And that reintroduction is not always comfortable, but it is always sacred. Nathan goes on to explore clarity in conflict. He teaches that conflict is not the enemy. Confusion is. Most arguments, he explains, are not really about the surface issue. They're about misalignment in values, unspoken expectations, and lack of clarity around needs. Precision helps us enter conflict differently, not to dominate, but to understand, not to win, but to connect. He encourages us to ask in tense moments, what am I truly feeling? What am I truly needing? What part of me is hurting? And then, to communicate from that place with simplicity, not blame, with honesty, not shame. When we speak with clarity, others don't have to guess. When we listen with presence, we begin to hear beyond words. This kind of precision turns conflict into intimacy. It creates safety, and from safety, real healing can happen. He reminds us that silence is not always peace. Sometimes, the loudest misalignments are hidden in unspoken words. Precision asks us to tell the truth kindly, clearly, and consistently, not just in what we say, but in how we show up. When our words match our energy, and our actions match our values, we become trustworthy both to others and to ourselves. Nathan also delves into the idea of alignment with purpose. He says that each of us carries a unique frequency, a distinct expression of life that only we can give. Your job is not to find it in the world, but to remember it within yourself. Precision is the practice of tuning in, asking, what is mine to carry? What is mine to create? What is mine to release? These questions don't always lead to fast answers, but they lead to the right ones. He shares that purpose is not always loud or grand. Sometimes, it's quiet, a steady presence, a way of loving, a way of serving, a way of creating beauty in small, consistent ways. Precision helps you see your purpose not as a destination, but as a way of moving through the world. It's not something you chase, it's something you live. Every time you choose alignment over approval, truth over comfort, peace over performance. And then he speaks about the power of language. The words you use shape your reality. If you constantly say, "I'm overwhelmed," you begin to live as someone who is always overwhelmed. If you say, "figuring it out," you allow space for grace. Nathan encourages us to speak with intention, to replace vague language with clarity. Not someday, but by this date. Not, I'll try, but I will not, maybe, but I choose. Precision in language leads to precision in energy, and energy shapes outcomes. He also encourages us to speak life into ourselves, into others, into our spaces, to bless our homes, our work, our children, our dreams, not out of superstition, but out of spiritual leadership. Because the words you speak become the atmosphere you live in. And when your language aligns with love, faith, and vision, everything around you begins to rise. As Part 6 draws to a close, a soft truth lingers. The more precisely you live, the more sacred life becomes. Not because everything is perfect, but because everything becomes present. You stop rushing, you stop performing, you stop pretending, you begin being, fully, honestly, lovingly, and in that being, you find that the life you once longed for was not in some distant place. It was always here, waiting for you to see it clearly and live it bravely. By this point in our journey, we begin to feel not just the ideas in this book, but the impact they're having on the way we see ourselves and our lives. The power of precision is no longer a distant philosophy, it's becoming a lived presence. We notice it in our decisions, in our thoughts, in how we respond to life. Calvin W. Nathan isn't simply asking us to adjust our outer actions, he's inviting us to step into a completely different state of being. And in this next layer, he begins to talk about legacy, not in the traditional sense of money or reputation, but in terms of energetic residue. What is the emotional, spiritual, and human experience that you leave behind wherever you go? Precision, he says, helps you live a life where your impact is intentional, not accidental, not reactive, but consciously chosen. He asks, what do people feel after interacting with you? What energy lingers in the spaces you leave? What part of your presence becomes part of someone else's story? These are not ego questions. They are spiritual questions. Because your presence is powerful, even when you're unaware of it. And when you bring clarity into your presence, you begin to carry peace wherever you go. This, Nathan teaches, is how everyday people become healers. You don't need a stage. You don't need a title. You need precision in how you speak, how you listen, how you see others, how you see yourself. When your inner alignment is intact, people can feel it. You walk into a room and shift the atmosphere without even trying. Not because you're loud, but because you're clear. And clarity is magnetic. He also challenges us to bring precision to how we define success. Many people are living by a success blueprint they never chose. They're chasing numbers, status, or milestones that don't actually bring them joy. And yet, they keep pushing, keep comparing, keep performing, not because it feels right, but because it feels familiar. Nathan invites us to pause and ask, what does success mean to me truly, personally, soulfully? If no one else could see or applaud your success, would it still be meaningful to you? This is where many begin to realize that what they actually Want is peace, purpose, creative expression, authentic connection, not followers, not applause, not approval. And this is where precision becomes a radical act of self-definition. When you create your own metric for success, your life becomes yours again. Your goals become sacred. Your path becomes sovereign. And every step forward becomes an offering to your own becoming. Nathan reminds us that redefining success may feel like a loss at first. You might let go of ambitions that once impressed people. You might stop competing where others still run. You might slow down while the world keeps rushing. But what you gain, clarity, fulfillment, emotional congruence, is worth infinitely more than what you lose. Because when you are aligned, you are free. This leads into another powerful area of reflection: transitions. Life, Nathan says, is full of them. Jobs change, relationships shift, seasons evolve, and often, we resist these transitions not because they are wrong, but because they disrupt the illusion of control. But precision doesn't fear transition. Precision navigates it. It doesn't panic in the in-between. It listens, it learns, it adjusts with grace. He likens transition to a sacred hallway. One door has closed, another has not yet opened, and the hallway feels dark, uncertain, disorienting. But it is also holy, because in that stillness, in that waiting, something new is forming. A new identity, a new strength, a new level of clarity. Nathan teaches us to trust the hallway, to stop trying to rush out of it, and instead ask, what is this transition here to teach me? What am I shedding? What am I gaining? What is being reborn in me? He tells the story of a woman who lost everything in a matter of months: her job, her relationship, her home. At first, she fell into despair. She had built her identity around what she had, what she did, and who she was to others. But in the emptiness, she began to hear herself again. She journaled every morning. She walked in silence. She stopped explaining her journey to people who didn't understand it. And slowly, her life began to rebuild, not on performance, but on purpose. Her clarity had been born in the dark, and that clarity became her compass. This is one of Nathan's most gentle truths. Sometimes, you find your real precision after things fall apart. Because breakdowns create space, loss clears the noise, and from that raw, honest place, you can finally ask, what matters now? And the answers that come in those moments are pure. They are not dressed in ego. They are whispered by the soul. Nathan then speaks about clarity in calling. He makes a distinction between calling and career. Career is what you do. Calling is who you are. Your calling is not always tied to a title. It's the energy you bring into every space, the way you uplift, the way you challenge, the way you create. Your calling might express through your work, but it lives in your presence. Precision helps you honor that presence by showing up consistently in your truth, no matter the context. He encourages us to stop searching for the perfect job, and instead, become the most aligned version of ourselves wherever we are. Because when you live in alignment, opportunities find you. Doors open that effort alone could never unlock. Your energy becomes your sum. Your clarity becomes your brand. Your integrity becomes your invitation. This clarity in calling also brings discernment. Nathan teaches that not every open door is meant for you. Just because something is available doesn't mean it's aligned. Precision helps you see beyond attraction and into assignment. It helps you say no to what would distract, even when it looks good on the surface. It helps you stay faithful to your own blueprint. As he often does, Nathan brings it back to practice. He invites us to sit quietly once a week and ask these three questions. Where did I feel most alive this week? Where did I feel most drained? What do I want to bring more of into next week? These questions are not about judgment, they are about alignment. They help you make subtle course corrections. They help you refine. Because this is how real transformation happens, not in grand gestures, but in quiet adjustments. A small shift in a habit, a deeper presence in a conversation, a more honest word. These are the building blocks of a precise life. Finally, as part, Nathan introduces the concept of soul fidelity. He says the ultimate goal of precision is not success, or clarity, or even peace. It is faithfulness to your own soul. Every day, you're given the chance to either betray yourself or honor yourself. Precision is the discipline of choosing the latter. It is the quiet, daily vow to live in such a way that when your head hits the pillow at night, your soul can whisper, "You were true today. You were whole. You were home." And that is the power of precision. As we step into this next stage of the journey, something in us has already begun to shift. Perhaps we've slowed down a little. Perhaps we've started to question with more curiosity. Maybe our inner voice, once faint and uncertain, is now beginning to speak more clearly. That's the quiet miracle of living with precision. Not that we suddenly change everything, but that we begin to see everything with new eyes. And from this fresh seeing, we begin to live from truth, rather than habit. In this part of the book, Calvin W. Nathan explores a powerful but often misunderstood space: vulnerability and self-expression. So often, precision is mistaken for rigidity, for structure that tightens rather than frees. But Nathan reminds us that true clarity creates emotional freedom. When you know what you feel, what you believe, what you need, and you can express it, your life begins to breathe again. He opens with a truth that lands gently but deeply. Many people are not unkind, they are unclear. They don't know how to name what's inside them, so it comes out in confusion, frustration, or withdrawal. They don't lack love, they lack the language to express it. And this is where precision becomes a tool of healing. Not because it makes us eloquent, but because it makes us honest. And honesty, especially when tender, can rebuild what silence once fractured. Nathan tells the story of a man who struggled to express his emotions. He had been raised to believe that silence was strength, that showing feelings was weakness. So he spent years speaking in generalities: "I'm good, it's whatever, nothing's wrong." But inside, he carried unspoken grief, shame, even joy that never had a voice. It wasn't until he began journaling with precision, using exact words, not vague moods, that he started to feel free. "I feel disappointed because I wanted to be seen. I feel proud because I followed through." These were simple sentences, but they became keys. Every emotion he named became an emotion he released. That's the power of naming. Nathan reminds us that emotional ambiguity leads to emotional tension. But when we bring precision to our feelings, when we say, "Not angry, I'm afraid," or "Not cold, I'm hurt," we begin to understand ourselves. And when we understand ourselves, we stop needing others to guess, fix, or carry what was always ours to name and feel. He offers a practice: the emotional vocabulary upgrade. Take common feelings like bad, fine, stressed, and replace them with deeper, truer words. "I feel disoriented. I feel overlooked. I feel unprepared. I feel inspired." When we use clear words, we activate clear responses in ourselves and in our relationships. The people around us stop needing to interpret our tone, because our truth is now visible. This clarity in expression also transforms how we give and receive feedback. Nathan says that the most transformative feedback is not harsh or vague. It is kind and specific. Telling someone, "You're always like this," invites defensiveness. But saying, "When you interrupted me earlier, I felt dismissed," opens space for understanding. Precision disarms conflict. It replaces blame with awareness. And in that awareness, connection grows. He gently walks us into the topic of intimacy. Not just romantic intimacy, but the intimacy of being known. He explains that many people long for deep connection, but live behind emotional smokescreens. They show versions of themselves polished, agreeable, safe. But precision invites us into sacred risk, the risk of being seen. And when we allow ourselves to be seen clearly, not perfectly, we invite love that is real. Nathan shares a beautiful truth: vulnerability without clarity is chaos, but vulnerability with precision is healing. Saying "I'm broken" can feel dramatic and unhelpful, but saying "I'm afraid of being abandoned" or "I feel overwhelmed by change" allows someone to meet you. It creates a bridge between two souls, and that bridge becomes the space where trust grows. He reminds us that you don't need to share everything to be real. Precision is not about overexposing, it's about sharing what is aligned, timely, and true. It's about asking, what is the most honest version of what I feel right now? And then speaking it with softness, without weaponizing it. In this way, communication becomes a spiritual act, not just the exchange of words, but the exchange of presence. This leads into another deeply moving topic, grace and forgiveness. Nathan writes that many people struggle with forgiveness not because they are unwilling, but because they are unclear. They haven't named what actually hurt them. They're carrying vague emotional weight, a mix of disappointment, betrayal, confusion, but they've never slowed down to define it. And without definition, healing becomes elusive. He encourages us to write letters we may never send. Letters that say, here's what I needed. Here's what it felt like. Here's what I've learned. The point is not to reopen wounds, but to create emotional precision, to release ourselves from the fog of pain and move into the clarity of meaning. Nathan teaches that when you give yourself the gift of understanding, forgiveness becomes less about forgetting and more about freeing. He also invites us to forgive ourselves. And this is perhaps the most tender kind of precision, the willingness to see our past clearly, without distortion, to stop minimizing our mistakes or exaggerating them, to say, I did the best I could with what I knew. I hurt others while I was hurting. I have grown, and I will do better. Self-forgiveness, he says, doesn't make the past vanish, it makes the present possible. It unhooks us from shame so we can live forward. In this part of the book, Nathan also speaks to creativity not just for artists, but for anyone with a soul. He believes every human being is a creator. Whether you write, cook, design, parent, build, or simply bring beauty into a conversation, you are creating energy that did not exist before. And when you live with precision, your creativity stops being random. It becomes rooted. He shares that many people feel blocked not because they lack ideas, but because they are scattered. They try to create from obligation, from comparison, from pressure. But true creativity flows from clarity. When you know what you value, what you love, and how you want people to feel, your creativity has direction. And that direction makes your work powerful, even if it's simple. Nathan encourages us to create from the inside out, not to wait for inspiration, but to make space for it, to schedule time for reflection, to make room for boredom, to honor the rituals that awaken the soul. Music, walks, stillness, beauty. He says your creative life will bloom when you give it structure, not as a cage, but as a container. Because even art needs boundaries to come alive. And as always, he circles back to the heartbeat of it all. Alignment. When you create from alignment, your work carries a certain kind of frequency. People feel it. They don't just hear your words or see your designs, they feel your clarity. And that clarity is healing in a world full of noise. As part 8 closes, we feel how expansive this work truly is. What began as a conversation about clarity has become a movement of the soul. It's about how we speak, how we feel, how we love, how we express, how we forgive, how we heal. The power of precision is not a skill, it's a return to truth, to integrity, to spiritual and emotional fluency. And maybe that's why it feels so sacred, because it's not just teaching us how to live, it's teaching us how to be. As we move into the deeper currents of the power of precision, a quiet revelation begins to settle in. This way of living is not about control, it's about congruence. Congruence between what we know, what we feel, what we say, and what we do. Congruence between our values and our calendar, our intentions and our interactions, our inner truth and our outer behavior. And when this congruence is present, something remarkable happens. We begin to live without friction. Calvin W. Nathan teaches that friction, the constant emotional resistance we feel in daily life, is often not about what we're doing, but how we're doing it. We say yes when we mean no. We push forward when we need rest. We entertain relationships that don't reflect our self-worth. And so, our days are filled with small internal misalignments that add up to fatigue, anxiety, and a sense of being lost inside our own life. Precision removes that friction. It brings integrity back into the rhythm of living. In this part of the journey, Nathan speaks about discernment, the quiet power of knowing what is right for you, even when it's not popular or obvious. He says discernment is not a loud voice, but a deep feeling. It's the knowing behind the knowing. And the more precise you become in your self-awareness, the more you begin to trust this inner compass. You stop needing constant validation. You stop over-explaining. You begin to move with quiet confidence, because your choices are coming from a place of alignment, not approval. He shares a practice he calls inner check-ins. Before saying yes, committing to something, or responding emotionally, pause and ask, does this feel aligned or just expected? Am I choosing this from peace or from pressure? Is this who I am or who I think I'm supposed to be? These questions don't take long, but they save us from months, sometimes years of confusion. Because once you begin to trust your inner signal, you don't need every answer to be logical. Sometimes your body knows before your mind does. Sometimes peace is your confirmation. And sometimes the most precise thing you can say is simply, this doesn't feel right, even if you don't yet know why. Nathan also brings discernment into the way we handle opportunity. He teaches that not every open door is divine. Some doors are distractions. Some are tests of discipline. Some are wrapped in gold, but hollow inside. Precision gives us the courage to pause, to evaluate not just the opportunity, but who we would have to become to maintain it. If something costs you your peace, your joy, your integrity, it's not a gift. It's a trap dressed in success. He tells the story of a woman who was offered a dream job. On paper, it was perfect. High pay, prestigious title, everything she thought she wanted, but in her gut, something felt off. The energy was wrong. The culture didn't align with her values. In the past, she would have ignored that feeling, but this time, she honored it. She declined the offer. Months later, the company folded, and the same clarity that saved her also guided her to a more fulfilling, if quieter, path. That's the power of precision. It protects what you can't yet see. The same discernment, Nathan says, must also be applied to who we allow to influence us. He teaches that voices shape vision. The people you listen to online, in real life, in your memories, all become architects of your self-perception. If those voices are rooted in fear, shame, or scarcity, you will begin to doubt your own path. But when you become precise about what you allow in, your mind becomes a sanctuary, not a battlefield. He challenges us to audit our influences. Who are the 5 voices you hear most often, not just audibly, but emotionally? What messages do they reinforce? Do they speak to your strength or to your fear? Do they see you or try to fix you? When you clear out the noise, what remains is your own voice. And that voice, when trusted and developed, becomes the greatest guide you will ever know. Nathan also teaches about momentum. He says that clarity without motion is a form of self-betrayal. Once you know what matters, once you've named your truth, the next step is sacred action. And not always big action. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is to take one small, clear step forward. Make the call, end the habit, change the language, rework the plan. Momentum is not about speed. It's about direction. And when that direction is aligned, even the smallest movement creates ripple effects that change your life. He tells the story of a man who wanted to write a book. For years, he talked about it, bought journals, studied other writers, but he never began. Until one day, he gave himself a rule. Write just 100 words a day. That was it. No pressure, no perfection, just 100 clear, honest words. 2 years later, his book was done not because of grand inspiration, but because of daily, aligned momentum. That's what precision makes possible. A life built not on bursts, but on consistency. Nathan also shares that the key to sustaining momentum is to reduce complexity. We often overwhelm ourselves with excessive goals, detailed strategies, and unrealistic timelines. But clarity thrives in simplicity. He suggests choosing one core focus for each season of life, one clear area of growth, one central commitment. When your energy is pointed instead of scattered, you become exponentially more effective and more peaceful. He says, don't confuse ambition with alignment. Just because you can do it all doesn't mean you should. And that brings us to another liberating truth. Precision requires sacred restraint. The ability to say, not now, not this, not in this way, not from fear, but from vision. Restraint is not suppression, it's selection. It's knowing the difference between what is urgent and what is yours. This naturally leads into a conversation about sustainability. Nathan teaches that clarity must be sustainable to be real. Any plan, any pace, any goal that burns you out is not precise. It's performative. He invites us to build lives we can actually live in. Not just lives that look good from the outside, but lives that feel good from the inside. Where your energy matches your values. Where your body is honored. Where your relationships are nourished. Where your soul has space. He talks about recovery, the power of rest, retreat, reflection. He reminds us that clarity is not a one-time epiphany, but a cycle, a rhythm, a dance between output and restoration. And the more you honor that rhythm, the clearer you become. Because precision is a form of listening, and we hear most clearly when we are still, Nathan suggests scheduling clarity days. 1 day per month where you pause from performance and reconnect with intention. Reflect, recalibrate, release what no longer fits. Remember who you are. These small pauses become sacred anchors. They prevent drift. They restore direction. As Part 9 draws to its close, we begin to feel the deep texture of what Calvin W. Nathan is offering. This is not just a self-help guide. It's a blueprint for living with emotional maturity, spiritual integrity, and soul-centered momentum. It's a way of moving through the world where your steps are not rushed, your words are not hollow, your days are not wasted. A life where everything you do and everything you don't do is rooted in truth. And perhaps most beautifully, you begin to realize that you are the author of this life. Not your past, not your critics, not your fear, but you in your clearest, calmest, most courageous self. Now, we arrive at the final stretch of this journey, and as we look back over the path we've traveled, something becomes clear. This wasn't just a book. It was a mirror, a compass, a quiet invitation to come home to the deepest part of yourself. Calvin W. Nathan, through every page and every insight, has gently guided us away from the noise and into the rhythm of a precise life. A life not driven by external approval, but one shaped from the inside out with intention, integrity, and peace. In these closing reflections, Nathan introduces what he calls soul alignment. Soul alignment is the point at which your inner being and your outer actions are no longer at odds. It is when your words don't fight your values, when your relationships reflect your standards, when your work is an expression of purpose, not performance. He says, when you are in soul alignment, you don't need to chase anything, you simply allow what is meant for you to arrive. He emphasizes that this alignment isn't something you find once and keep forever. It's something you choose, moment by moment, in each conversation, in each decision, in each turning point. Precision becomes the spiritual discipline of choosing alignment again and again, especially when it's hard, especially when it costs you the comfort of old habits or the illusion of safety. It's in these moments that your truth becomes real. Nathan reminds us that clarity is not just about removing the wrong things, it's about making room for the right ones, the right people, the right rhythms, the right work, and most importantly, the right version of yourself. He writes that many people have unknowingly built lives that are too full to allow transformation. Their days are packed, their emotions are suppressed, their thoughts are crowded, and so, even when insight arrives, there's no space for it to land. He encourages what he calls sacred subtraction, the practice of deliberately releasing what no longer resonates without drama, without guilt, without delay. A project, a habit, a connection, a belief. He says, what you release with clarity will always be replaced with something better aligned, even if it takes time. In this way, letting go becomes not a loss, but a powerful signal to the universe. I am ready for what truly fits. This final part also explores identity, not the labels we wear, but the truth beneath them. Nathan teaches that precision helps us distinguish between who we've become and who we actually are. Many of us are walking around wearing armor that once protected us, but now only weighs us down. We become so used to surviving that we forget we are allowed to thrive. Precision gives us the language to rewrite the narrative. To say, I am not my trauma. I am not my title. I am not the version of me that others prefer. I am the person I choose to be now, today, here. He invites us to release outdated identities. The people pleaser, the perfectionist, the overachiever, the silent sufferer. These roles may have kept us safe once, but now they keep us stuck. He says the bravest thing we can do is to allow our identity to evolve not by force, but by truth. Because clarity doesn't change you into someone new. It reveals who you've been all along. And as this realization unfolds, Nathan gently transitions into a conversation about presence. He writes that presence is the final fruit of a precise life. When you are no longer pulled in 1,000 directions, when you are no longer pretending, when your heart and your actions are in agreement, you arrive fully into the now. You don't just exist. You experience. You taste your meals. You feel your breath. You hear what people are really saying. You see the beauty in the ordinary. And you live, not in reaction, but in response. He reminds us that a precise life is not a perfect one. There will still be mistakes, disappointments, unexpected detours. But with clarity, you begin to navigate those moments with grace. You don't collapse. You recalibrate. You don't spiral, you pause. You don't cling, you trust. And in that trust, you begin to understand what Nathan means when he says, peace is not the absence of problems, it is the presence of alignment, even in the midst of uncertainty. In one of the most intimate sections of the book, Nathan writes a letter not to the reader's mind, but to their spirit. He says, you are allowed to be clear. You are allowed to be still. You are allowed to change your mind when new truth arises. You are allowed to want less. You are allowed to want more. You are allowed to speak with depth and silence that carries weight. You are allowed to stop explaining and simply begin becoming. And you are allowed finally to be exactly who you are, without shame or apology. He goes on to say that the ultimate gift of precision is freedom. Freedom from chaos. Freedom from overthinking. Freedom from the burden of constantly adjusting who you are to keep others comfortable. Precision, he says, sets your life in divine order. Not so you can control it, but so you can flow with it. From this place, you begin to trust not only your path, but yourself. This freedom also deepens your compassion for others. When you live with clarity, you no longer need to project your pain. You no longer judge others for their process. You become patient, kind, discerning, but not cold, boundaried, but not bitter. You realize that everyone is on their own journey of alignment, and just like you, they are finding their way. And so your presence becomes healing not because you tried to fix others, but because your clarity makes space for theirs to emerge. Nathan ends the book with a simple but profound invitation. Stay with the practice. There is no final arrival, no ultimate version of you. Precision is not a finish line, it is a lifelong returning. Returning to center, returning to presence, returning to what matters, over and over, gently and courageously. And if you do, if you stay with the practice, stay with the process, stay with your truth, then slowly, steadily, your life will begin to look and feel like a prayer answered. Not because it's always easy, but because it's always real, because it's yours. And so, we come to the end of this unfolding not with closure, but with clarity. Not with a bow, but with a breath. A breath that says, I am ready now. Ready to live slower, deeper, truer. Ready to let go of what is hollow and choose what is whole. Ready to honor what I feel, what I value, and what I dream. Ready to live with precision, not to impress, but to align. Not to strive, but to become. Our life from this moment forward carry the mark of intention. May your words be few, but true. May your steps be deliberate and light. May your relationships reflect your worth. May your time be sacred. And may your soul uncluttered and unhurried find peace in every corner of the life you choose to build. This is the power of precision, and it is already within you.